Welcome, everyone, to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Reardon, and I'll be your coach this evening. So today we have a treat, right? So we are going to be speaking with Mark Noblet today, and he is a former educator, and now he's doing coaching. And him and I talked for a few brief messages on LinkedIn, and he and I just kind of said, hey, you know what would be great? Let's talk about our experience as educators, as coaches, and let's see if we can help people understand the problems with education and how they can possibly start to implement things to negate what the school system is doing to the young minds, to teenage minds, to even adult minds in college. We want to make sure that you're equipped to handle situations. And right now, people are not equipped to handle many of the situations that they're dealing with. That's why people fall into depression. That's why there's severe anxiety, fear of failure, public speaking. All that stems from not having enough experience. You don't see people like Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Zig Ziglar. When they go on stage, of course, they're a little bit nervous, but they have done it so much where it's automatic for them, right? They have enough experience now that is second nature to them. So the things that get us nervous, the things that are going to make us think twice, right? Maybe we're going to fail or we're not good enough. It's because we don't have an experience yet that proves otherwise. So we want to talk about that, and we're going to do that right now with Mark. Welcome, Mark Noblet, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Michael. It's nice to be here.
So our conversations today is going to be very formal, right? We're going to have a cordial conversation just about what you do, what I do, and our experiences, right? Because you're a former educator, correct?
That's right, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
My background is I started out in primary school education. Mm-hmm. So in this country, that's age group from 4 years old through to 11.
Mm-hmm. And you're in the UK, correct?
So in the UK and specifically England, we have separate education systems in all of the home nations. Mm-hmm. So yes, my experience is specific to the English education system in primary schools.
Okay, and how long were you in the primary schools?
I worked 10 years.
10 years.
I started out
same as me.
Same as you, yeah. I started out as a classroom teacher. Mm-hmm. And I sort of moved up through various different leadership roles. Mm-hmm. And then I became, after 6 years, I became a deputy head teacher, which you would call a vice principal. I was just about to move into being the head of a school as a principal, and I got really sick in 2013. Mm. So I got very, very poorly. I had 3 years of treatment for a blood cancer called Hodgkin lymphoma. Mm-hmm. And then when I went back into work in 2016, I couldn't go back into schools full time because I had a very compromised immune system. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of looked at where the gaps in the market were with a need for leadership support and directed my energy towards that, and then built a business supporting school leaders and governors in helping their schools to deal with the challenge of being inspected and all the political aspects that go with that, mm-hmm. whilst maintaining the things that they really want to do as schools, because no one goes into education to be inspected, mm-hmm. and fill in spreadsheets and data and that. So I went in and worked with schools, helping them to do the good stuff, do the things that you want to do, and that means getting all the other stuff right in the background.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. For me, when I was a teacher, it was more to just help the students, right? To help them grow, to help them evolve into better people. And the school system here in America is very restricted, right? So we have a curriculum, which is good, but then at the same time, there's certain aspects of it that don't need to be taught. So right now in the school systems, they're talking about critical race theory and things that should be taught in schools. Right. So it's not about accounting. It's not about balancing a checkbook or home X. It's more about what we need you to know. For that, I saw that. Right. But I still had the ambition. I still had the dream that I could change the school system, right? I could be a good teacher and I could make a difference. And that is true, right? For the students that I taught, they evolved in the way I wanted them to, right? They were more confident, they were more mature. And whenever they came to my class, it was always something that they enjoyed. When they saw me, they were always excited to see me. It wasn't like, Mr. Reardon again. It was like, all right, what are we doing today? It was excitement.
Yeah.
And though I loved it every single day, I was only hitting a small market in my district, right? Because I was only teaching in one district. And I mean, yeah, I might have interacted with maybe 10,000 students in the district, but that's out of the whole world, right? So how many, children are in the world? How many students, how many people need the type of leadership mentorship that I want to offer? And though it would have been a great thing to help and be a small piece of that puzzle, I wanted a bigger piece of the puzzle. Yeah. So I said, okay, what can I do, right? And in 2016, that was when I had left teaching. And in 2017, I was kind of still like on the borderline of like, do I go back to teaching? I like it, but then I don't know the direction I wanted to go. So 2018, I started my coaching career. And then from there, it just started to evolve, right? So eventually, is going to touch base with the school systems and to be able to go in there and to talk about school retention, leadership, confidence building, and who they want to be for the future. Because when you're young, you talk about what do you want to be when you grow up. But then as you go up in the grades is more of standardized testing. And that is contradicting what they learn when they're young, saying you could be anything. And then they take a test saying, oh, you can't be that anymore. You might as well change your mind.
Yeah.
So all that is kind of like confusing to a lot of people who don't understand the school system, right? They look at it from an outside point and they say, well, teachers get paid to sit on their butt or something like that, right? So they have a misconception. And since COVID, they have a better respect for teachers, right? Just because here in America, there was the quarantine, the lockdowns, and the students would have homeschool and that would be online. So the teachers will give them assignments or they'll meet on a Zoom call. But now the parents are having to deal with teaching their kids, explaining things that they don't understand because the teacher can't go up to them in class individually and say, hey, what's going on? Like, where are you messing up? So now parents are now becoming teachers and now they have a newfound respect. And that's why here in America, a lot of parents are going to these school board meetings and are fighting.
Yeah.
So all that's happening. It's a lot of stuff happening in education. Is it the same thing over there?
I find all of what you just said really interesting, particularly the part at the end where you said that you've got parents now who are engaged in pressuring the authorities to properly support and fund schools, because there is that ongoing misconception that teachers turn up at 9, go home at 3 and then get 13 weeks holiday a year. It is an incredibly challenging job and rewarding job, most amazing job in the world.
Definitely.
At the best of times, but during COVID, that I think it exposed so many societal issues in our country, and I'm sure in America as well. I think what you said around the switch to online delivery, one of the greatest things it exposed in our country is just how few people below a certain social demographic have access to the internet. It was a huge surprise to a lot of people in power in government that huge numbers of children couldn't access the internet because either they didn't have broadband at home or they didn't have devices that were ready to go online and do Zoom like we're doing now.
Right.
Because they're expensive. And if you're a family who's struggling to put food on the table, then paying £30 a month or $50 a month for fast broadband, and then another several hundreds of dollars for a device that can access the internet and allow their children to learn. It's not just top of your list of priorities. You just can't. You don't have the money.
Right.
So there was some real awakenings, I think, with the understanding of the poverty gaps in this country, and then the respect that parents gained for teachers and the skill it takes and the vocation that's required to make learning fun and engaging and relevant. All of those things have really been brought to the fore during this last 18 months. The most interesting thing that, in terms of what I heard you saying then, the thing that really, for me, made me think, I wonder if that's happening in this country, I can't see it, is the parental pressure on the authorities, on the government, to properly fund and recognise the importance of education and educators.
Yeah, it's going to be just something you have to pay attention to, because what I notice is when it comes to school, parents send their children to school, and at the end of the day, they say, "What do you learn?" The kid typically says, "I don't know what I learned."
Yeah.
So now the parent is like, "Well, what are you doing in school? Like, what's going on?" And they are learning, right? But it's not to the point of, do I need to retain this information that I learned and tell my parents, like, hey, I learned this today. This is important for me to know, because the school teaches a curriculum, right? So in kindergarten, you're going to learn a set of knowledge, skills, etc., and it's going to go all the way up into 12th grade, right? You have exactly what you're going to learn. A parent can go onto any school website and find the curriculum, right? Or any district website and find what the kids are learning or supposed to be learning. Now, at the end of the year, if the student doesn't know that set of curriculum, who failed, right? Was it the teacher? Was it the school district? Was it the parent? And there's a lot of blame going around. It's the teacher's fault. It's the teacher's fault for not being able to teach my kid. Education, it can't end at the end of the school day, right? From ages 1 to 7, that is when a child is learning the most, because they're learning from their environment. Everything they see, they're learning from, whether it be how mom and dad operate, how the teachers cooperate with each other, how the teacher teaches other students, their environment they live in. So if they live in the ghetto, that's their mindset, that's their environment. If they live in a wealthy neighborhood, that's their environment. That's the way they see the world. It's interesting when you work with different demographics of children. Some might be in inner city, some might be in wealthy parts of town, and just their mindsets, how they operate, how they think. And it's very interesting. A little bit later, we're going to get into race, but just the aspect of learning and teaching. Children don't know what they need to know. They learn what they learn. So we need to be more cognizant of what we teach them as teachers, as parents, as political leaders. All that has to come together because the kids are watching. If we're going to teach them something negative instead of something positive that's going to benefit them, how's that going to relate in 10, 20 years when they're older, when they're adults now? Now, these are the new leaders of our society, of our, this generation is now the leaders. They're leading us. But if they're not equipped to be leaders, as many people aren't equipped to be leaders, where does that lead us?
That's Can I wind you? I could not agree more. Can I wind you back a minute and ask you a question about what you were saying there around curriculum?
Yeah.
Curriculum to me is a really out of date idea. In the traditional sense that curriculum is a prescribed bunch of information, facts, certain skills that we are supposed to teach and we learn. But when you were talking about the difference in the requirements of children in different demographics from different parts of town, doesn't that make curriculum even more ridiculous? In a way, to teach people, to teach all kids, basically, we teach everybody the same thing, then we give you all the same test, and then we put a stamp on you.
Definitely. So the curriculum is going to be just like your cookie cutter program. So for me, I like to call coaching programs cookie cutter because they don't work for everyone, right? So if we look at some big examples, Tony Robbins, Les Brown, right? Those are some big names in the motivational speaking world. And I've had people go to these events and say, oh my God, these events changed my life. And then I have people in the same turn say, you know what, the event was good and it was great, but it wasn't for me. Right.
Yeah.
So how can the school system be for everyone? Right. And we hear high school dropouts and they said school wasn't for me. I was always struggling in school. And even for myself, I was very fortunate growing up. My mother had sent me to private schools. So I had a good education, but I did not know how to learn in the school system. I just didn't know. And so from when I was probably like grades 3 to 5, I did not know how to properly learn, to educate myself, because we all learn differently, right? Are you a hands-on learner? Are you auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? And that's important to understand. And the teachers typically find out what works for you, but you also need to know what works for you to make sure you can learn most effectively. So I was getting F's, I was getting D's and F's and C's, and I was smart, right? My parents would educate me. I was going to good school, I had a good environment around me, but it wasn't enough, right? Because the curriculum there was set. It wasn't saying, what does Michael need? How does Michael learn? Yeah. And that is a detriment to further growth. Right. So for me, when I was teaching, and I would always get reprimanded saying, you have to do this, you have to do this. And then I would sneakily, it's not a word, but I would just go around what they told me to do. And I would, when it came to the testing, the assessments, I would do the tests and the assessments that they wanted. But the preparation that I did was my own preparation. And they all improved. But how did that happen? It didn't happen from me simply saying, oh, I followed the curriculum and the curriculum is great. I understood what they needed. I looked at the bigger picture. Teaching is the bigger picture. It's not simply saying, okay, well, I have a script that the district gave me and I'm going to read it verbatim. And now the kids are going to learn magically. Yeah. And it's politics, right? Some, if not the majority of people who are in the district creating these curriculums have not been in a classroom for either years or have never been in the classroom, right? Yeah. I know some directors, some superintendents who have been former educators, and now they're going into the realm of administration. But teaching changes. This generation changes. Technology is now in schools. Students can bring their cell phones and use their cell phones in classrooms because some schools don't have the money to buy laptops for every classroom. Yeah. So they allow students to use their cell phone for a certain project or, just everyday use in class. Yeah. Times are changing and the curriculum needs to change too, but it's not changing quick enough.
Oh, it's not changing quickly enough in this country or your country, or probably anywhere, to be honest, because the speed of change of technology is so rapid. We look at all the issues that are going on with the mental health and well-being issues created by Facebook, which I know is massive news in America, and all the social media platforms. The UK, what is still called the ICT, Information and Communication Technology curriculum, and computing, is 10 years out of date. And even though they update it, it's still 10 years out of date because a lot of the people writing it aren't current, and the pace of change is so slow in big government, in those areas. But all the stuff that you were talking about just then around your own behaviour and learning, I didn't particularly enjoy school. One of the reasons I went into education was out of the arrogance or the confidence of youth to say I can do this better. Yeah. I can go, like you said at the start, I can go and change the world. I'm going to go and make education fun for these kids. And to a certain extent, I hope I achieved that. And I think that, my students would hopefully say that my teaching and learning was at the very least always fun and engaging. But what you're talking about with the way that you approached exams, and you used your learning behaviours and behaviour for learning to understand what was required of you in order to pass the test. That's a really high level of thinking. That requires a high level of thought to go, I don't like this. This isn't me, but I'm going to work out the way to satisfy you people with the tick box exercise. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get the tick in the box, then I'm going to move on. But that requires a really high degree of learning, of synthesis, of the ability to take what you already know and apply it to a situation. That's life. That's what we need to get to the point of being able to do, is to assess the situation, assess the challenge, and then apply the skills that we have in order to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. But in our education systems, one of the great failings of it is that we don't spend enough time on those behaviors for learning, mm-hmm. in order to understand how to learn and how specifically do I learn. And there are so many incredible teachers in this country doing amazing things where they adapt their teaching in order to address the needs of the individuals in their class, the visual, the kinesthetic, the auditory learners, the kids who require a different kind of stimulus, the kids who require quiet or lower levels of stimulation. All of those challenges, teachers are incredible at adapting to the needs of the kids in front of them, which are becoming ever more complicated. And then we get to a certain age in this country, it's 11, and we go, do a test, and it's the same test as everybody else in the class. Go. And by the end of that test, what we'll do is we'll then place a big old mark on your forehead saying, you're the best, you're the worst. And that's it. We start at 11 branding children with their capability or lack thereof. And that's so destructive. And it's just completely mad, the way that we educate children. When I was at school, somebody came, one of the things I do remember at school, somebody came in and said, by the time you go into the jobs market, I think I was probably about 10 at the time, by the time you get a job in 10 to 15 years' time, 50% of the jobs on the market will be new. They don't yet exist. And you sit there and you think, well, I don't believe that. And it was absolutely true. And it's the same now. 10 years ago, there was no such thing as an influencer.
Right.
And whether that is a job that you want to aspire to or not, it is a job. A YouTuber is a job.
Yeah.
As are digital online safety experts, which wasn't a thing 10 years ago, just wasn't there. So jobs all the time, and then jobs in industry to do with digital technologies developing all the time. And our education system hasn't really moved on in not just 10 years, but probably going on 100 years. Mm-hmm. Reality is we still sit kids down and stamp them with grades.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And I want to touch base about the limiting beliefs that you put when we stamp someone's person, their character, by saying the standardized test says you are this level, right? So this is what you are. What does that do to people, right? The limiting mindset, the limiting beliefs. Do you believe that's beneficial for them long-term? Or do you think it's something that the majority of people will grow out of?
I don't think the majority of people grow out of it. I think that that sort of labeling stays with you for a long, long time, if not for life.
I agree.
And, the system is geared towards the brightest because it tells them you're bright, you're capable, you're the best, you're the top grades. And therefore you have a belief that you're the best. And it's not specific to a subject or a particular skill. You're just told you're the best because you were top of the grades. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is in America, the SATs, you got the highest score in the SATs, therefore you are the best.
Yeah.
But at what? Because there will be kids who got lower on the SATs who have incredible emotional intelligence, who have astonishing creativity. And yet, we label people using the same test the same way. So if you're told from an early age that you are low down in the pecking order, it takes a real type of character and a huge amount of determination and external support, both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, to pull yourself through that. And essentially, stick your middle finger up to the system and say, I'm not bottom of the pile. No way. Mm-hmm. That takes a certain type of person. And it isn't the case for a great many people. Great many people retain the belief that they are not capable, and they retain it for life.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes courage to get out of that belief, that limiting belief.
It does, yeah.
And one of the things that hold true to today is the reason why my company is called Reven. And if you just turn Reven around, it means never, right? So turn never around. And I was a coach. I was doing swimming, right? So I was a swim coach and I taught kids from 6 months all the way to 18, right? So that was my job, right? I was a swim coach and I was very effective at it, right? Parents can come and they went to 3, 4 other swim schools and they'll say, Mike, I am done. I took them to this swim school, and nothing is working. And then they always say, this is the last bit right here. And I'm not paying anymore because swimming is expensive, right? For my swim lessons, it was $50 just for half an hour. And that's USD. So that's expensive. And the parents knew that is expensive for someone to learn how to swim. And I remember one mom came in and she says, I'm not paying any more money. And I asked for permission. I said, I can do anything I want. I'm not going to hurt them, but can I do anything to get them to swim? She goes, Mike, whatever you want, as long as they swim, I don't care what you do. And I got those boys swimming, right? Because they had a block in their mind, whether it be from the previous teachers, instructors. I'm sure they were great teachers, instructors, coaches, but why was I able to do it and not them? It's because they couldn't address the fear. And the fear was they were afraid of the water. And now we look at the school system and how they're preparing individuals for the real world. What are they afraid of? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know if they have test anxiety and that's why they failed the SAT. We don't know if they are just not good test takers. But if you ask them any question on that test personally, they can answer it, not a problem. And giving someone a piece of paper and saying to write down some answers is not effective teaching. It's not, because I can give you tests, and if you get half of the answers wrong, I can label you anything I want. I could say, oh, he didn't study enough. Oh, he's not a good test taker, or et cetera, et cetera. I can label you whatever I want. And when that happens, if I label you something, I'm creating a belief in my mind saying, you know what, Mark is actually not very smart. Why should I even care? And that is powerful because teachers think that way. I've been in conference rooms. I've been in lunch rooms where teachers, same teachers are teaching, your kids are talking about that said student saying, oh, they failed the test again. Like they're not going to surmount to anything or something along those lines. And don't get me wrong. I have worked with some amazing teachers, wonderful, wonderful teachers, right? Better than myself. And I aspire to be just like them, right? Or even a fraction of that, because that's how amazing they are. My cooperating teachers, the teachers I work closely with, they were amazing. But then there's always a set few, right? Where they have a limiting belief, maybe a negative mindset. And that stems from when they were young, because they didn't take the steps to change. And that's important, because if we see the problems in the school system and we become part of the problem in the school system, we're just repeating the process. And for me, that was crazy. So I wanted to start to turn that process around and say, you know what? If someone labels you not smart, dumb, whatever, that you can't do something, come talk to me. I'll figure it out. Because not everyone's going to be able to figure it out. And not everyone has the willpower to take care of people and help people. And that's important to have. So my question to you now is going to be, how can teachers become more effective? Whether it be go against the system, would it be just rising to the challenge of trying to be the best teacher every single day, et cetera?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. I think the broader issue around the way that we as teachers continue to allow children to be labelled, continue to facilitate the system is a problem. I think that the profession needs to show more courage in the way that it pushes back against the system. Because what you said then about a lot of teachers carry, the baggage of an education system that hasn't really changed, and then continue to pass that baggage on to the students that they teach, is very counterintuitive to what we want to achieve as teachers. Nobody goes into education, nobody becomes a teacher to administrate tests. Right. We go into teaching to improve lives, to open eyes, to to enable children to become the best that they can be. And so I think that we need, as a profession, the profession's leaders need to have more courage to push back against a system that is no longer fit for purpose. In the perfect world, that's what would happen. In the reality of the day-to-day, I think that it comes down to leaders in schools having the courage of their convictions and making sure that the decisions they make in leadership are rooted in those original motivations, the original morals and ethos and beliefs that took them into education in the first place, to make decisions that allow their staff to have freedom to teach in a way that is relevant to the children in their classes. And that's tough, because as the leaders, then the top-down pressure is always so high on schools' results, on league tables and grades in this country, on external inspection in this country. The pressure is enormous, and it takes a very, very grounded and rooted leader to be able to balance out all of the reasons why they became a teacher and went into school leadership. And again, that's tough. I think my view is that the unions, the school leaders unions, need to be more effective in fighting that corner, and again pushing back against the system, so that schools can deliver an education that is relevant and suitable to the needs of their kids, which will be very different in one part of town to the other.
Right. Definitely. For me, I've had great principals where they would fight for what I was doing, and they would ask me, like, are the kids learning what they need to learn? And I said, yep, I'm doing exactly what the paper is telling me, but I'm doing it a different way. And they said, well, as long as they're learning and they know everything they need to know, do what you got to do. Yeah. And the progress they saw whenever they came to my classroom, they say, this is good. I like this. And I had some principals who would bend to the will of the administration or bend to the will of parents. And this is early on in my teaching career. There was a wonderful teacher. She taught English, and she gave a student like a B or something, right?
Yeah.
And the parent came in, affluent neighborhood type of thinking. Parent came in and made it a huff and a puff of why their kid got a B, right? And there was meetings, there was conferences, there was calls, there was a lot of back and forth for weeks. And eventually the principal spoke to the teacher and said, is it really worth this headache? Is it really worth this?
Yeah.
And the teacher says, no, it's not. And the kid got an A. So what did that kid learn? Mom fights hard for me.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything. Mom's going to take care of anything.
Yeah.
And that's where parenting was going, right? And COVID kind of broke that up, where a parent can come in and fight for their kids, saying, why did my kid get this grade? My kid is smart. My kid doesn't deserve a B. He deserves an A because he's so smart, or she's so smart. And now parents get to see their kids learn at home.
Yeah.
What are they doing? Literally, they can see their kid doing what it is they're doing in school now. And there's a bunch of TikToks, of YouTube videos of parents coming on and doing testimonials saying, teachers, I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
My kid, they're a handful, right? And we need to pay you more, okay? If just let me know, I can just send me your PayPal, and I'll send you some more money. So these parents realize that, their kid is sweet, right? Of course, you're going to love your child. Yeah. But when it comes to teaching, educating, and the whole format of what it is to learn in a school, it is theoretically, or just the structure of it is to sit down, be quiet, and take in the information I give you, right? That is not for everyone, right? We have some people who need to get up and they need to dance, they need to be free, they need to move. Yeah. And when we restrict that type of movement, that type of imagination, it kills the youth so soon, right? Where these first graders now, they're, just hitting 7, right? They're at the peak of their learning environment, are understanding like, wow, life is very stressful.
Yeah.
And that stress carries on every single year.
It does. Yeah, because you start off, nobody starts off in life believing that they can or they can't. Mm-hmm. But you see it in kids. You see at a certain point in a primary school, they stop being children and start worrying about the world and the labels that the world's going to place onto them. Mm-hmm. And what you were saying then, I'm sure you've seen Simon Sinek talking about exactly that idea around, what is labeled the millennial problem. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a fair way of describing it, but the behaviors he describes are absolutely accurate. And one of them he talks specifically about is kids who've never learned to fail because for one reason or another, they were always given a recognition of success or, a higher grade because of one reason or another. Failure wasn't allowed to happen, mm-hmm. be it because of parents complaining or just because it was everybody gets a medal in the race kind of idea. And that really is not very helpful as we go through life because it teaches you that you can only succeed. Mm-hmm. And the reality of life is that we have to fail 1,000 times before we succeed or improve or grow. Mm-hmm. And if we get to the point in life where we go out into the big bad world and we are not able to recognize that failure is a good way to learn, then we're in a world of trouble. Mm-hmm. Because you've never learned to fail. Right. And that comes, that work it backwards. Schools are under pressure to get kids to pass tests. Mm-hmm. So we don't want anybody to fail the test. And so we hothouse them and pressure them and teach to the test so that they pass the test and therefore experience a degree of success. Mm-hmm. But at what cost? It comes at the cost of everything you were describing then, the creativity, the physicality, the fact that not everybody is the same. Mm-hmm. It's a major, major issue and will continue to be as long as we keep with the high stakes assessment and testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then another aspect of education is how they view the rest of the world, right? So, for example, I am an African-American. Right. So I have brown skin and you are, I would say white. Is that a fair assumption? Right.
Yeah. White Irish.
White Irish. Right? Yeah. So for me to see race, where did that come from? And typically racism stems from when you're young, mm-hmm. how your parents view other races. Right. So if my parents said, oh, this race is evil and you need to watch out for them, then I would be operating in a more of a negative realm toward that race or toward that culture. Mm-hmm. And when we don't talk about racism, it doesn't exist. I've seen kindergartners, different races, playing together, loving each other, hugging, smiling, being friends. And they didn't care what color they were. Mm-hmm. It's only until we start to talk about, hey, don't play with them because they're this type of person or they have this type of belief. And that is another aspect to education. Mm-hmm. We tell people what to think. You need to think this way because I think this way. You need to do what everyone else is doing. And if I avoid someone, you need to avoid them too. And it's like the school system is just a cog or it's just a factory that pushes out product, right? The students. And everyone should be the same, right? Because if we're giving them the same curriculum, the same teachers, they should all be the same. Mm-hmm. So when they come out, they should have limiting beliefs. They shouldn't be courageous. They should have no imagination. They should get a 9-to-5 and just submit to whatever the government or whatever the world says that they need to do. Mm-hmm. But we always have outliers. Why is that? Why do people go against the grain? Why do people challenge the system or challenge what they learned. But there's a good majority, 60+% or around 60% of people who just accept what their life is. Because there's a reason why 2% succeed so easily. And not easily in the sense that they didn't put in hard work, but massive success. How did they get it, but everyone else is struggling? They're in a rat race. They are just living in poverty. Whatever it be, it's because they don't see the bigger picture. So my final question to you is, how can people start to see the bigger picture, whether it be race, whether it be society, politics, etc.?
Wow, how long we got?
You got as long as it takes.
I think that there has been a huge moment in the last 12 to 18 months around the opening up of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just the bigger picture has only just started to be revealed. Mm-hmm. You know, if we're just uncovering, if the big picture is on a wall in the gallery, mm-hmm. we've just started to peel away the cover before we see the whole thing. Mm-hmm. When I look back at my experience of teaching and what I did in the classroom, on the whole, I'm extremely proud of what I did. But the last 18 months has caused me to reflect really deeply on where I failed in regard to exactly what you were just talking about, the big picture. It's really rooted in the principles of coaching that I'm not going to try and project my experience onto you, but I will stand next to you and try and see what you're seeing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say that I'm ever going to feel the same as you. I couldn't possibly, because your experience is different to mine, but I'm going to try and stand next to you and see how that might feel. I think that's perhaps the way that we need to view it as educators. We're not going to try and impart facts and information regarding the way that a black person's life differs from a white person's. But we need to try and find a way so that we can have a deeper empathy with one another mm-hmm. around how somebody's life and experiences have been different. Mm-hmm. And when I look back at the way that I taught, I mean, one of the things that made me cringe the most is around the way that that my classroom is in the English school system, you have Black History Month. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's mad in itself that you have a month. Black History Month. Okay, so that's probably a part of the problem. That there was a month and we went all out on Black history. Mm-hmm. But how the hell am I supposed to teach with any degree of empathy Black history? Yeah, I have no experience of it. Mm-hmm. So I did my best through my contacts and connections to bring people into my classroom to talk about that where I possibly, but there wasn't enough of it out there. There wasn't enough opportunity to bring people in and talk about the world through their eyes. So that was a major problem and a major failing on my part. And my last substantive post, where I was the deputy head in a school, we described our school as the United Nations. We had over 30 languages spoken. We had children from every part of Europe, Africa, Asia, absolutely unbelievable diversity represented in our school. But I feel uncomfortable about the lack of investigation and conversation we had around each other's cultures. And, I'd consider myself to be I embrace opportunity. Our conversation today has come about for about 10 messages that we exchanged and said, let's have a conversation. Yeah. That represents the way that I go about things. I'm always interested to talk to interesting people. Mm-hmm. But I don't think my classroom practice always reflected that in the way that I encouraged my students to ask and answer questions around what's it like to be a different colour than me? Right. What's it like to be from a different country? What's it like to have a different religion to me? Because until we start opening that conversation up and being very, very honest and not feeling awkward about just saying, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Tell me about it. It's the best question you can ask. Mm-hmm. Somebody, tell me about your life. Tell me about how it is to be you. And until you've done that, that's the starting point. And I believe that everything we've seen in the last 18 months with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of those enormous world-shaking events, at the very least, it should start conversations where people don't feel awkward to say, what's it like being you?
And for me, I'll go a step further. The fact that we're not having these conversations earlier, it just keeps people in their lane. So people say, well, I'm only supposed to do this, so I'm going to do this, right? That's kind of like where the saying, that's not my job, came about, because they understand this is my lane, I'm staying in my lane, and I'm not supposed to deviate. And if I deviate, I'm wrong, because if I did deviate before, I stood up in classroom and the teacher said, sit down. Or if I was talking to a friend and I was told to be quiet, you're not supposed to be talking in class. Okay. We learn from a young age in the classroom what is allowed in that society, in that environment. And we just take that classroom and we bring it all the way into adulthood. So we let our voice sit in a corner and we don't want to say anything. And that is where we're having a problem with the whole vaccine mandates and whole cultures, like the cultural separation. That divide happened, it stems from when we were young, and people don't see the connection. It's very hard for them to see, like, oh, the school is the start of the problem, right? Because if people are going to be thinking in a mindset of, all right, well, I just need to do what I'm told. Now, when they're being questioned, they're trying to find their answer. And that's a whole nother conversation, because it goes deeper, right? And this is, in our talk today, is just the surface of what needs to be talked about. And we could talk for hours, but at the same time, I do have to, go to the next meetings, and I'm sure you're a busy man too, but let people know how they can find you.
This conversation has been really energizing, and I've scribbled a couple of things down here because I want to go and think about them a bit more deeply. But in terms of finding me and what I do, my website is marknobleteducation.com. I don't know if you can put a link up on your.
Oh yeah, of course.
So marknobleteducation.com. If I'm on LinkedIn, again, Mark Noblet, which is Noblet. And if anybody wants to engage in conversations and actions around coaching and education, I'm always up for speaking with people with like minds, but also different minds and different ideas.
Yeah, and just from our conversation, you seem like a wonderful coach and educator, and anyone who's going to be working with you is going to be in definitely good hands.
That's really kind of you to say, Michael. I appreciate that, and just the depth to which we've gone today in this brief conversation. I think I would certainly reflect that back to you. It's you are a great listener and somebody who directs people's thinking really nicely. So I appreciate your time and appreciate today.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, everyone. So welcome. If you're just joining in, that is a must-watch interview with my guest, Mark Noblet. Please follow him on his social media platforms. He is on LinkedIn, so make sure to follow him there. And to go to his website, marknobleteducation.com, to see some of the work he's done. And then if you're interested in working with him, whether it be a guest on your podcast, just a general conversation, or to work with him as a coach, right? So he is a great communicator, great educator, and I thank him so much for that interview with me the other day. And share that video with as many people as you can, because what I'm looking to do from that conversation is to bring in more like-minded educators, more like-minded coaches, more like-minded political leaders, politicians, to talk about that. Because if I was a teacher still, I might be able to go to some meetings and I can maybe have some picket signs and, say that, we need to change the curriculum, and I can keep on fighting that way. But when enough people start to see something is wrong, then things start to change. Look at BLM, for example, right? People saw something that was wrong and then things started to change. Now, of course, not overnight. It's going to take some time, but we do have to be diligent in our efforts for that change. And it's not necessarily for me or for you, but for future generations. So for your children, for your grandchildren, those are the people that are going to have the biggest benefit if we can change the curriculum to help them succeed in the world we're living right now. So again, my name is Michael Reardon. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. And until then, I will see everyone. Take care.